Good afternoon, members of Parliament, support staff, visitors in the public tribune, radio listeners, TV viewers, and those viewing by various forms of media, and actually a special welcome to viewers and media in Curacao that I understand are tuned in. Welcome to this Central Committee meeting number 2 for today, Wednesday, September 27, 2023. I'd like to give a special welcome also to the Minister of Finance and his support staff, that is Minister L.N.L. We've established a quorum of 9 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I received notice of absence from the following members: Bijlani, Ramu, Westcott Williams, and Arundel. Are there any other notifications from members of Parliament at this time? I see no need. Thank you, members of Parliament. We have as agenda point for this meeting a detailed outline of the ongoing ENNIA situation, the proposed ENNIA loan mentioned in the media by the State Secretary Van Huffelen, the impact to the national budget, and government's intentions towards the situation in light of the September 30th, 2023 deadline. This meeting is registered under IS 025 of the 23-24 parliamentary year, dated September 20th, 2023. This meeting was requested by the members of Parliament Gumbs, Peterson, and Weever. We go over to the agenda point. On September 20th, 2023, Parliament received a letter from the members of Parliament Gumbs, Peterson, and Weever with a request for an urgent Central Committee meeting of Parliament with the Minister of Finance to discuss the above-mentioned agenda point, considering the ongoing situation with ENNIA, which has prompted the discussion of a 600 million euro loan from the Netherlands with a deadline of September 30th, 2023 to either accept or decline. These are, of course, based on the media reports and the manner in which it was motivated within the letter. Considering indeed that expected deadline, the Presidium had a discussion to call this meeting as urgently as possible. We were able to get the Minister of Finance with us today. The Minister is here. At this time, however, before going over to the Minister, I would like to give the opportunity to one of the requesters to motivate and explain their request, and that one will be MP Gumbs. Yes, MP Gumbs, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Weever, the Minister and his support staff, those joining us in the Tribune and online, and of course as well a special good morning to my colleagues and counterparts in Curacao who were quite excited about this meeting, so I know that they're following closely. Just to elucidate a bit the reason for this request, today I'm hoping for Parliament and the public to receive not just the history of the ENNIA problem, as it is a very complex problem, but a clear and viable way forward. Of course, I have questions based on what we've received in Parliament, what has been reported in various media, locally and in Curacao, and I will hold those, of course, for after the Minister's presentation, which may itself also raise questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. With that, members of Parliament, the Minister has received the urgent request, which outlined a little bit of some of the questions or areas in which we would like the Minister to inform the Parliament. So with that, we will give him the opportunity to have some opening remarks, which he will do now, after which we'll give members of Parliament the opportunity to pose questions. At this time, I give the floor to Honorable Minister of Finance, L.N.L. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Weever. Good afternoon to the members of Parliament. Good afternoon to the media. Good afternoon to the general viewing public and our colleagues and the people of Curacao, I heard, also tuning in. I'll go straight into it, Mr. Chairman. I'll give a detailed outline of the ongoing ENNIA situation. In addition to the information provided to Parliament by my letters of August 28, 2023 and September 11, 2023, and the information the Prime Minister provided to the Committee of General Affairs during the meeting of September 13, 2023, I hereby present the following detailed outline on the ENNIA situation as requested. Government intervention is necessary because the problem is large capital shortage at the ENNIA, and without a solution, 30,000 plus policy holders would have to have their pensions significantly reduced, which would have social and economic consequences. For any solution, it is important to realize that any solution is only possible with an agreement of Curaçao, Sint Maarten, the Central Bank of Curaçao and Sint Maarten, and the Netherlands, as the policyholders are residents of Curaçao and Sint Maarten. The Netherlands has declared its willingness to borrow the capital injection under the reservation of the approval of the Dutch Second and First Chamber with those loans. So as soon as one of the countries do not agree, there is no solution for the ENNIA situation. To come to a joint solution, negotiations have taken place on technical level between Curaçao, Sint Maarten, the Technical Committee ENNIA, the Central Bank of Curaçao and Sint Maarten, the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations, the Dutch Central Bank, and the Ministry of Finance, the Netherlands. Based on these negotiations, it is acknowledged that the intervention is necessary because there is a major capital shortfall at ENNIA, and without a capital injection of 30,000 policyholders would have to be cut in their pensions considerably, which would have major social and economic consequences. On a technical level, the countries, Curaçao and Sint Maarten, and the Central Bank reached an outline agreement in which it is established that ENNIA will make a solvent restart with a significant capital injection. This solution chosen is considered financially sufficient by the TCE experts and assessed realistically. On a technical level, agreed in the outline, Curaçao and Sint Maarten, for their parts, will on-lend the received loans from the Netherlands through a capital injection to ENNIA. The agreement still needs to be confirmed on a ministerial level, and of course, under the reservations of the approval of Parliament through the budget 2024. The biggest issue at the moment is that Curaçao will have such a significant increase in debt and debt to GDP ratio that it is expected that Curaçao will immediately or very quickly exceed the interest burden norm of the Kingdom Act Financial Supervision, Curaçao and Sint Maarten, which can potentially jeopardize capital investment loans, as these loans will be in violation of the RFT, once the interest burden norm is exceeded. On August 21st, 2023, the Board of Financial Supervision, the CFT, wrote an advice to the Prime Minister of Curaçao and the State Secretary of BZK on this matter and urged to reconsider this situation. In addition, the Minister of Finance of Curaçao shared on his Facebook shots of the CFT advice on the budget 2024 of Curaçao, September 1st, 2023, which indicates similar concerns of the CFT. Both advices were shared with Parliament on September 11, 2023. Based on the CFT letter on August 21st, 2023, negotiations are taking place with Curaçao to reconsider the situation. The proposed ENNIA loan mentioned in the media by State Secretary Van Huffelen. By letter of August 28, 2023, Parliament was informed on the latest developments regarding the refinancing of the COVID-19 liquidity loans and conditions set by the Dutch government for the favorable interest conditions as decided on by the Kingdom Council of Ministers of August 25, 2023. As indicated in the information package, for now, Sint Maarten received a favorable deal than Curaçao and Aruba, and even more favorable than offered in the first instance by the Netherlands, through the letter of the State Secretary of the Interior and Kingdom Relations on May 15, 2023. Namely, Sint Maarten is offered a full refinancing amount of the 316.4 million guilders, interest only, against a 3.1 interest rate. The loan components with different maturities, 15 years, 22 years, and 30 years for a spread repayment profile. However, the refinancing offer is subject to the condition that ENNIA's situation must be resolved, providing that the binding term sheets for ENNIA loans have been signed by Curaçao, Sint Maarten, and the Netherlands no later than October 15, 2023. This was until yesterday, September 30th, 2023. As stated before, the term sheets, once signed, are of course under reservation of the approval of the relevant budgets of the countries by the relevant parliaments. The term sheet on ENNIA loan would be in line with the conditions of the refinancing loan. However, for Sint Maarten, this would be of course for a lower amount with a range of between 80 to 100 million guilders. The term sheet will lapse if an agreement at a ministerial level on the outline agreement has not been reached by October 15th, 2023. As I mentioned before, this was previously September 30th, 2023. The impact on our national budget. Of course, the impact on the budget can be finalized once the loans are agreed upon. However, based on the current proposals, the impact on the national budget is for the refinancing. 3.1 interest on the refinancing amount of 316.4 million guilders is about 9.8 million guilders a year. Based on the collective sector report of 2021 from St. Martin, the current interest norm is 32.7 million guilders. Based on the implementation report Q2 2023, our current interest burden is 14 million guilders. If we add 3.1 interest on the refinancing of 316.4 million guilders, that would be 9.8 million guilders. The new interest burden will become 23.8 million guilders. As stated before, St. Martin, for its part, will on-lend the received loan from the Netherlands through a capital injection to ENNIA. The loan will in principle be mirrored from the Netherlands to St. Martin and from St. Martin to ENNIA, meaning that the interest St. Martin has to pay to the Netherlands will in principle be the same interest ENNIA has to pay to St. Martin. However, the CFT will add the ENNIA loan to the interest burden of the EFT, which will become approximately 26.6 million guilders, and as such under the interest burden norm of the 32.7 million guilders. So we still remain under the interest burden norm of 32.7 million guilders. Government's intention towards the situation in light of the September 30th, 2023 deadline is, as stated before, the refinancing offer is subject to the condition that ENNIA situation must be resolved, providing the binding term sheets for the ENNIA loans have been signed by Curaçao, St. Martin, and the Netherlands before September 30th, 2023. The term sheet will lapse if an agreement at the ministerial level on the outline has not been reached. And to be clear, these agreements are not final, and all are under the reservation that the parliaments of the countries approve the relevant budgets. However, as indicated before, there's no solution as long as all the three countries are in agreement. At this moment, negotiations are ongoing with Curaçao as per the advice of the CFT of August 21st, 2023. On September 26th, 2023, which was yesterday, the above deadline from the September 30th is postponed to October 15th. And I believe today, September 27th, Curaçao and the Netherlands have continued further discussions and negotiations as per the CFT advice. Mr. Chairman, I trust to have updated the Central Committee of Parliament sufficiently and count on his support on this matter. I would like to thank you for the invitation and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Minister. Before turning over to the members of Parliament, because I expect the question would be asked, is the information that you provided there, can that be provided to Parliament in writing? Yes? Okay. Members of Parliament, you've heard the opening remarks from the Honorable Minister of Finance, Artwell Arian, which has summarized the various questions that were posed within the letter inviting him to this meeting. Members of Parliament, you now have the opportunity to pose questions in the Central Committee meeting to the Minister of Finance. I see we have one member already signed in to speak, and that is MP Melissa Gumbs. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to everyone again. Thank you to the Minister for those brief remarks regarding the initial questions posed then by the agenda points for this meeting. Through you, Mr. Chairman, Minister, in your response to questions that I sent in writing before the summer recess of Parliament, you responded to my query about whether St. Martin had established an advisory committee for this situation. That while the committee in Curaçao had been established by their government, it was done without the involvement of St. Martin. But you also stated that since May 2023, we're now involved in that said same committee. Could you share which companies, entities, and persons are involved in that advisory committee so that us and the public can be aware? Additionally, prior to the summer recess of Parliament, there was a deadline given to the governments of both St. Martin and Curacao to come with proposed solutions to the issue. I believe that first deadline was June 30th. In the letter submitted to the Dutch Parliament by State Secretary Van Huffelen, it's mentioned that in August, the governments of Curacao, St. Martin, and the central bank came to a solution for refinancing of the COVID loans plus the currently proposed 600 million to cover the ENNIA policies and solvency issues. So I'd like to ask what other avenues were explored prior to settling on this particular proposed solution, which also includes, as the minister mentioned, a capital injection to cover solvency. Additionally, in that letter, it stated that the solution was umtaluk, so sort of behind the scenes then with government and the central bank. So who was involved in those discussions? Again, going back to this advisory committee, and who sits on that advisory committee? Mr. Chairman, last night the Ministry of Finance sent out a press release that I suppose was also meant to kind of assuage concerns of the public and Parliament over what is coming. But the reporting in the Antilliaanse Dagblad revealed a bit more than what was mentioned in that piece and here in this presentation. So I'd like to ask a few questions regarding that. The AD mentioned that St. Martin's share in what is coming, which is a proposed new company, ENNIA Caribe Leven, ECL, will be established, and that our share in that will be 7%. In addition, there's going to be a new holding company, ENNIA Carib Holding, ECH. Can the minister confirm this, and can he explain what formula was used to calculate this 7% of the shares, again, based on the AD's reporting? Because if that's the case, then the loan coming from the Netherlands to us, to our portion, then would kind of amount to 84 million, again, based on that article, and that part of it would be injected as capital to cover the reserves threshold and the remainder as subordinated loans. So there's three things that concern me there. Of course, St. Martin and Curacao are assuming full risk for the loan. The part used for capital injection does not yield any interest income, and only the remainder would be generating interest income. So the ministry has also stated that the loan will, and I quote again, in principle, be mirrored from the Netherlands to St. Martin and from St. Martin to ENNIA, meaning that the interest we must pay to the Netherlands will in principle be the same interest that ENNIA has to pay to us, this new company ENNIA. But through you to the minister, Mr. Chair, with the 3 points I just mentioned, would it not be fairer for the interest paid by the new company, ECL, to not be higher, to at least provide a buffer for the reality of the non-income generating capital injection versus the subordinated loans, and to possibly allow accelerated repayment of said loan? Also, Mr. Chairman, in the press release, and as the minister stated, the CFT will add the ENNIA loan to the interest burden of the country, which will increase it to 26.6 million guilders, which then falls still under the current burden norm of 32.7 million. So just for our and the public's understanding, can the minister confirm that the remaining interest burden available to us before we begin violating RFT restrictions would then be 6.1 million guilders? And if we consider an assumed market interest level of 3.1 to 6%, does this mean that we still have room to borrow? I guess that would fall between 196 million to 100 million guilders or less if the interest rate were to go higher. Has the impact on our interest burden norm been calculated on a multi-annual basis, given the need for investments, especially capital investments in St. Martin? And could the minister provide a full overview of the room that is left for realistic investment? Further to that, Mr. Chairman, while we would remain with some room in our interest burden capacity, Curacao would be pushed over theirs, if I understand correctly, which is part of CFT's concern. So is there going to be a relaxation of that burden norm for them, as pretty much all countries did during COVID, including the Netherlands? And if that's the case, will that relaxation be granted to St. Martin as well, allowing us further room for loans related to capital expenditures, or heaven forbid, in the event of emergency? And lastly, for now, Mr. Chairman, as the minister mentioned in his opening remarks, if one party does not agree, then there's no solution. So what happens if Curacao does not agree? They've already kind of taken a mum's the word approach on this from a governmental perspective. So if they do not agree to the deal, by October 15th is the new deadline then what? And that's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. MP Gumbs. I would like to adjourn the meeting for 3 minutes until 2:40, and then we will continue with any other speakers. Meeting adjourned for 3 minutes. Good to go. Good afternoon once again, honorable members of parliament and viewers. We had a brief adjournment where we will now go over to the next speakers from the members of parliament, and next we have MP Christophe Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to the Honorable Minister, his support staff, the people of St. Martin, my fellow colleagues, and everyone who is watching and viewing in our islands, as well as Curacao and Aruba, who's paying attention. Mr. Chairman, I have said it before, I'm going to say it again, that the idea of the minister to entertain any sort of agreeing with the loan is madness. Not only is it madness, but it shows a level of incompetence. I heard the minister, Mr. Chairman, on a radio program with Lady Grace when the question was asked about the loan, and he said, if you are one of those pensioners, what do you think your only concern is? Is just receiving their pension. And that may be the case, or that may be so, Mr. Chairman, but what about the amount of debt that we are accumulating for 60, 70,000 as a population in the next generation who will have to be paying this over and over and over? The thing about it, Mr. Chairman, is that we are building a mountain of debt. The minister can come and, as much as he would want to talk about our debt ratio and how we still have room for this and still have room for that, that all sounds nice. But we are incurring more debt over and over as we go along. Now, the minister may not be here come after January 11, which would be a good thing. However, Mr. Chairman, the minister needs to understand that we didn't cause this problem. The people of St. Martin didn't cause this problem. Yes, I understand, and I can see where the minister is saying that, listen, it's a problem. But I would like to ask the honorable minister, because neither one of us was here, are you aware that this problem with ENNIA has been an issue since 2010? Are you aware of that? Are you aware that the Dutch government knew of this issue since 2016? Are you aware that there was question in the Dutch parliament, in the second chamber, concerning this issue with ENNIA? Hoekstra, the finance minister, was questioned by Van Rack. I would like to ask the honorable minister through you, Mr. Chairman. Want to take a break?
No, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if he knew about that discussion at that parliamentary meeting that they had in The Hague, and if you know the answers about it. If you don't know, I have them, I can send them to you. Where it was made mention that Curacao and St. Martin are autonomous islands. So they're responsible. So the Dutch washed their hands off of it back then, when they knew about it. But they washed their hands off of it back then. But now today, we have the benevolent Minister of Interior, so concerned, more concerned than all the members of Parliament here about St. Martin, so concerned that a loan must make available. And Mr. Chairman, I heard the Honorable Minister said in his reading that it's a multi-island and country issue, meaning that St. Martin and Curacao and the Netherlands is all part of it. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister, how is it the Netherlands is part of it? In what way? In what manner? Is there ENNIA in the Netherlands? I would like to know if they have pensioners of ENNIA from the Netherlands. And how much is the liability for the Netherlands? Because if it's 600 million, and the bulk of that 600 million is going to Curacao, and supposedly our issue is supposed to be 144 million, supposedly, you can correct me if wrong. How much is it for the Dutch government? Since they are so concerned about ENNIA, how much is it on their behalf, Mr. Chairman? And then also, Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Minister made mention that ENNIA will be getting a capital injection. From where? And for how much would ENNIA be getting that capital injection? In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to know, besides Curacao, how much will St. Martin be responsible for? And the reason why I'm asking that question, Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Minister, again referring to the radio program he was on, when asked that question, he said about between, oh no, it's not a 600 million. The 600 million is not for St. Martin. It's between 60 and 90. How much is it really? Because 60 and 90 is 30 million difference. So exactly how much is it? In particular, only for St. Martin. I would also like to know, Mr. Chairman, can the minister give us a precise figure on the amount that is accumulated for the pensioners here in St. Martin? And how many pensioners are we talking about? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? How much? How many are we? Yeah, but I want to hear it from the minister. I want to hear it from the minister. exactly how much. I don't want to hear approximately 3,000 and no. What is the number? 3,100, 3,000, 2009. How much, how many pensioners are there exactly in St. Martin? That's what I want to know from the Honorable Minister. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, the Minister make mention again on this capital injection to ENNIA. If the Dutch government is so concerned, why don't they directly loan the money to ENNIA and have ENNIA pay off the loan? Why don't they directly loan the money to the central bank? Because the central bank is the one responsible. Because of oversight and not paying attention. Why must the money be loaned to the governments of St. Martin? Mr. Chairman, I guess the minister will say, because the government of St. Martin and Curacao is part ownership of the central bank. I guess that will be his answer. But why can't the money be loaned directly to the central bank and leave the central bank deal with the insolvency or solvency with ENNIA? Why must it be loaned to the governments of St. Martin and Curacao, and that the people of this country, through their taxes, should be paying that back on whatever percentage it should be? Those crazy numbers that was being mentioned in terms of interest. Why? Why must the people of St. Martin be dragged into something that we had nothing to do? Ansari stole, fleeced his own company and dragged these islands in it. So if that is the case, I believe he was condemned for about 200 and something million. 200 and something million. Where is that money? Is the governments of St. Martin and Curacao going directly after that money? Because, Mr. Chairman, if that is the case, 200 and something million he's condemned for, then go for it right now, and then come January, the pensioners wouldn't have a problem, because how much does it add up to here in St. Martin? About 3 million, 4 million to pay them off every month? How much? How much is it? You see what happened, Mr. Chairman? The words being used, the narratives being used, the interest and place insolvency and this, those words sound nice to everyone who understands what it means. But the regular Joe is simply saying, well, why must I pay for this? Why must I pay for this? Mr. Chairman, I would like to know, when was the last time the Minister of Finance had a discussion with Van Huffelen? When? And how did that discussion go concerning the ENNIA issue? When? And Mr. Chairman, I don't care. I give no sort of consideration. As nice as she would want to be, that's not being nice to St. Martin. That's not being nice to St. Martin. The minister's only concern is 3,000 pensioners. My concern is a population of 60,000, 70,000 people in the long run. So I would like to ask the minister, because he made mention, Mr. Chairman, that our debt to ratio, we still have room. Can I get from the minister, how much is it that we are paying annually to the 1.2 billion guilders in debt? When we add on the 300 million for the COVID loan in debt, when we add on the 1 million from Bearing Point in debt, when we add on that, now your assistant could front his face as much as you want, it's a debt. It's a debt. It's an expense. Okay, now the minister would have to break it down for me and say, well, one has nothing to do with the other, and this loan. But again, I'm going through, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not saying that this is accumulated through this government or this term. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a debt on the books. It's an expense on the books. Let me use my colleague, the Weaver's financial terms. It's an unexpected debt of financial expense on the books. So we have the 1.2 billion, right? So he ain't frowning, so I guess that one is correct. We have the 300 million for the COVID loans. He's smiling even better. So I guess that one is correct too as well. So we're going to pack up the 1 million for Bearing Point. We're going to put that on the side, Mr. Chairman. That's why I asked the minister, is it 144 million? Is it 60 million? Is it 90 million in relations to the ENNIA portion of the 600 million that St. Martin would have to be responsible for? How much is it? Regardless to the amount, Mr. Chairman, it's an expense. So when you add all of that up, how it is that a minister can say our debt to ratio will still be good? And Mr. Chairman, given the trajectory that this government is going on, we are probably going to see more debt and more expense being added to our national debt. So I would like to ask the minister, can he break it down? Can he break it down in terms of how much are we paying? Now I know Graham is a maths man. That's the star child to the minister, because he comes up with answers just like that. So how much is it? How much are we paying to the 1.2 billion? How much are we paying to the 300 million COVID? How much will we have to be paying to the ENNIA loan? And now let me bring back in now the bearing point. Where did that 1 million come from for the government to pay it? Where did it come from? It had to come from somewhere. How much are we paying that back? How much is it? Break it down for me. And again, I'm coming back to the questions that I asked before, Mr. Chairman. You said, not you, the Minister Van Huffelen said, there is no other solution. What do you mean there's no other solution? I would like to ask the government through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Honorable Minister of Finance. Has the government of St. Martin made any proposal to see their way out of this situation concerning ENNIA? And then I would like to ask, ENNIA is located in how many countries? In how many countries is ENNIA located? I would want to believe also in Aruba. Can the Honorable Minister explain how was it possible for ENNIA, Aruba, to pull themselves out of this crisis and not be affected? Is it because, Mr. Chairman, that the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, being responsible for oversight for all financial institutions, have us lock, stock, and barrel part of this? I would like to know how that is possible that we are part of this, Mr. Chairman. In addition also, can the minister from 2010 to present, name all the board members that were on the board of ENNIA from St. Martin, and also the director? So I would like to know from 2010 to present, who are the board members of the Central Bank? Who are the board members of the Central Bank? From then to now. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, how much money did they make? I want to know. Because I'm seeing that PSAS, the Honorable Prime Minister of Curacao, have made a starch decision with Mr. Saleh, an 80-year-old gentleman. He's banned from speaking in the Netherlands. He's stripped of his ministerial, whatever was attached to him. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister here in St. Martin, who you're stripping here in St. Martin? Who you're pointing fingers at here in St. Martin? Who you're going after here in St. Martin? What assets are you looking for here in St. Martin? I would like to know, Mr. Chairman. In addition to that, I would like to know also, what are the assets of ENNIA? And where are they located? Because I know the major one of Mother Bay is located right here in St. Martin. I would like to know, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in one of those questions, in the Tweede Kamer, it was asked, what did the National Bank, the DNB Bank of the Netherlands, do to mitigate and stop this from happening? The answer is, oh, no. We informed the Central Bank in 2016 of Curacao and St. Martin that you have a problem, that ENNIA is a problem. Then the question was asked to, and I think at that time, the Minister of Finance, Huxler, then what did you do as Minister of Finance? And to be clear, his answer is, they are autonomous countries. Autonomous countries. So we don't have much of a say. What has changed from 2016 to 2023? That all of a sudden, we are not that much autonomous anymore, that Van Huffelen can now shove it down our throat and say, take it or else. The interest is going to go up over here. And I would like to ask the Honorable Minister, what does one have to do with the other? Can the Honorable Minister explain to the people of St. Martin, what does the COVID loans have to do with the ENNIA situation? What? That if we don't take this here, we might suffer with it over here. What does one have to do with the other? Can the minister in layman terms, marble terms, plain and simple? But you know what it is? If we don't take the dollar here, then she can charge us $1.10 over there. Why? Why? Can the minister explain it as that, plain and simple? Mr. Chairman, I have a proposal, but I want to hear the minister answers. And I'll come back in the next round. I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel.
Not the next round, but...
Yeah, Thank you, MP Emmanuel. Next, we have MP Grisha Heliger-Martin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Minister and his support staff. Good afternoon to my fellow colleagues and to those in the Tribune and those listening and viewing online. Mr. Chairman, I had a good bit of questions, but I just deleted 3/4 of my questions thanks to MP Emmanuel. So I just have a few, and I'll await the answers to the question, especially to some of the questions posed by my fellow colleague, MP Gumbs. So I have something. I'll go a little more beyond this drama that we're in right now. Just like 4 or 5 questions. Did government, does the government know what the sales price was of Banco de Caribe and ENNIA at the time when it was seized? I guess it was seized by the central bank. And did ENNIA at the time have a surplus or a deficit when it was then seized? And what was the amount? If it was a surplus or a deficit, what was the amount then? And we all know of the case of the central bank taking our government to court on to clear the Mullet Bay Beach of all its structures. But why did central bank take that route? Does the government is the government aware the reasons behind? I didn't get to read it. Maybe just for public information to inform us. Why did central bank want? What was the reason behind taking government to court for that? And another question I have is why did they not operationalize Banco de Caribe and put the income into ENNIA? That's my question. Why did they not do that? And so my question in general is, once ENNIA and Banco de Caribe was seized, what was the amount? What was their worth? And if they had a surplus then? I had another question, but it's not coming to me right when MP. It's going to come back to me. If I remember it, Mr. Chairman, I'll call. Thanks again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Heliger-Martin. Next, we have MP Melissa Gumbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was waiting on a couple bits of information to come in before I could finalize my next set of questions. So, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned previously, we now know that there's going to be 2 companies formed, and the assets and liabilities of the old company are going to be transferred over to the new, similar to what was done with the Hero Bank situation in Curacao, with no discounts given. So this is normal in these types of situations, but it brought up a curious question for me, considering the individual that we're dealing with and the slipperiness of this entire ENNIA fiasco. So we're now moving all assets and liabilities out of the old co and into the new, based on the fact that capitalization of the old is low and essentially the value is nil. But Mr. Ansari always said that the old company was healthy. So could he now and this is maybe a speculation point for the advisory committee or so, could he now, for example, say, well, what you're doing now, moving all assets and liabilities out of the old and into the new, now I'm being expropriated. And if he goes this route and says, well, you've made a claim against me, and now, under this expropriation, I am making a counterclaim, so let's have our claims cancel each other out. Do we then get faced with a scenario wherein he and his co-conspirators are essentially let off scot-free? Further to this, there is also the question of the US-NL Friendship Treaty, dealing with investment protections, etc. Could he, with his connections within the Republican Party, which have been well reported on by US media as well, use this, and would that have an impact on investments coming to us, that he manipulates through those contacts US investors to weaponize them against him, Martin? So just as a food for thought. And then, Mr. Chairman, a recent IMF report mentioned this ENNIA situation at point 57 of the report, and I just want to read it here, if you indulge me, for the public's knowledge. So it reads, it will be vital to finalize a resolution strategy for ENNIA. Any solution should be weighed against the option of orderly winding down, given the fiscal costs. It will be critical to produce a thorough review of the long-term viability of the firm before considering recapitalization. If recapitalization is chosen, then a restructuring of the business, robust supervisory oversight, strong governance arrangements, and a clear exit strategy for the government would be necessary. The authorities are considering a financial stability fund to finance the resolution. But if the financial system is expected to contribute, an examination of the impact on financial institutions and intermediation should be conducted. A solution should avoid drawing down the international reserves of the central bank. A more structured dialogue between the CBCS and the governments that could be facilitated by a financial stability committee is needed to finalize the strategy for ENNIA's resolution. So, recapitalization has essentially been chosen. How do we guarantee robust oversight, supervisory oversight, strong governance arrangements, and a clear exit strategy for St. Martin? Regarding an exit strategy, I don't believe it's our business to hold shares in a commercial insurance company. So has the committee, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Minister, has that committee considered the marketability of the shares on the open market at a price that is at least equal to what is put in, so that the loan could maybe be extinguished in one go? Is this considered a viable exit strategy? And if not, what exit strategies have been considered? Because, Mr. Chairman, further to the exit strategy is the question of the robust supervisory oversight and strong governance arrangements. Because this entire situation is a gross failure of governance. The Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin has a history of these types of regulatory failures ever since the Parliament of the Netherlands Antilles passed that law to make them the regulator of insurance companies and brokerages, following the maritime insurance debacle that happened after Hurricane Lewis. They fail in their duties in the case of First Curacao International Bank. They fail to supervise properly in the case of Hero Bank, which cost the people and government of Curacao money. They failed in their duties regarding ENNIA, which now stands to cost us money. And lest we forget, they failed to exercise their regulatory duties properly in the case of the Christian Kingdom Credit Union, which cost St. Martin people their money. Because of what? Incompetent management at the credit union and weak supervision at the central bank. So again, it begs the question, what is being discussed to be put in place by both governments to prevent this from happening again, to ensure that we have robust supervisory oversight and strong governance arrangements? And finally, Mr. Chairman, and this is my last question for now, to the Minister through you, has this government, notwithstanding the legal battles currently occurring, approached the stakeholders mentioned in court documents to return the monies that they erroneously received? I'm not talking about just Mr. Ansari. I'm talking about the person, St. Martiners, with ties to government, to say it, because I don't like to call names, as an MP man watching me, he knows I don't call names, who have received dubious payments over the years. The two local foundations that receive undisclosed monies in the past, have they been approached to pay back the money incorrectly received? An amount of over 18 million guilders. If any of them are listening right now, I implore you to try find and activate your shame box and seek to make amends to the country that has clothed and fed you and your families for decades. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. Next, we have MP William Marlin. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you, to members of Parliament, and a hearty welcome to the Minister of Finance and his support staff, and visitors in the Public Tribune and viewers and listeners at home. Mr. Chairman, I have, thanks to the coverage by 98.1, I have been able to listen to the greater part of the introduction by radio, and by now, with the amount of questions that have been asked, there is very little to ask unless you basically technically duplicate. But Mr. Chairman, I must say, though, that there are some serious concerns from my end. And that is that if we look at the approach to this entire matter, there are two things that we have before us. The failure on the part of the central government, or the central bank rather, to exercise their supervisory role. So with this all happening, what has the discussion been with the ministers of finance of Curaçao and St. Martin vis-a-vis the central bank in terms of the execution of your responsibility? Any CEO of a company that fails, one would have to say so miserably, there would be consequences for them. So what has been the discussions like? Guys, this is happening too often, or guys, this has happened again. So where is the supervision in this, and where is management in this? Because it's not the supervisors that have to do the job, it's management that has to supervise these companies and have failed miserably in doing so. And if the Netherlands has indicated years ago, hey guys, there's something going on there, did you, thus the central bank, did you look into it? And if you looked into it, what was the outcome of it? Did you look and say, wow, this is bad, and we stayed away from it? Then I followed the discussion or the presentation of the minister as well, in which he is saying, the minister is basically saying, well, out of the discussions with the Netherlands, this is the proposal that we came up with. And for me, I'm curious to know what were the elements of the discussion? Was this the only proposal on the table, or was there a proposal from Curaçao and St. Martin, or from St. Martin as part of this entire discussion? And if it was, I would be curious to know what was our proposal to it. Because when we look at the entire playing out of this, it would appear as if, yes, in the end, our central bank has failed, but in reality, we have been severely abused by someone who we should say, shame, shame, shame upon you. It is not a small-time hustler who was trying something. It is not somebody who borrowed money to so-called make an investment and did not make the investment. It is seemingly clear that someone with billions, who could have easily, for whatever he used that money for, could have gone to one of his other accounts or one of his other companies and extracted whatever he wanted out of it. So clearly, it was like someone coming up with a nice little scheme to defraud the people of Curacao and St. Martin, who paid in to their pension plans, who paid into their insurance programs, and now stand to be at serious risk. And basically, the way it is, if ENNIA falls apart, the government is the one who will be looked at to help bail them out, because in the end, government central bank had to exercise the supervision. But in terms of recovering the funds, because I don't think it should be a matter of, okay, St. Martin government, you have failed along with the Curacao government in your supervision of ENNIA via the central bank. So therefore, you push some money into this thing and it all goes away. I don't think that should be the solution. The person who took this money out, maliciously took this money out, is someone who has assets around the world, including at times right here in St. Martin. A nice private jet lands and landed probably a week or two ago, and nothing seemingly was done when we saw the war between Russia and Ukraine, and there was an embargo out on Russia. People were seizing assets that belonged to Russians, not the Russian government, but that belonged to Russians. Big yachts and private jets and private yachts that were owned by rich people in Russia, when they entered certain ports, the ports were saying, shame on you Russians, we are going to hold on to this. So I don't know, like one of the MPs probably said before, it is known that the Ambassador Ansari is good friends with not just Donald Trump, but the Republican Party as such. Is this part of maybe the fear factor of Holland in terms of assisting us? Because we are bullied. We are within the kingdom, but we are being bullied every time by our biggest brother in the kingdom. We have seen that after Hurricane Irma. If you don't take, if you don't, and if you don't, and if you don't, and we keep seeing it with COVID, we keep seeing it with everything else, if you don't, if you don't, if you don't. So while you are bullying the countries in the kingdom, you don't need to bully, but use your leverage as one of the per capita richer countries in the world to say, well, hey guys, because I know the Prime Minister of the Netherlands has seen in discussions with his good buddy, the present President of the United States, that he can call upon him to say, hey, we have a problem here. How could you help us out of this? There should be, in my opinion, and if there is, and one says, well, the Netherlands is assisting us on the international scene through diplomacy, but we can't we can't divulge this, then I would say, well, okay, I respect that. But it cannot be that the Netherlands is sitting back, just pushing us deeper in debt and further in a corner, while the ambassador runs away scot-free. Another concern that I would have is, could it be that the Dutch, who has been keen or ruthless business people over the centuries, because they traded with my ancestors at least, and made exorbitant profits over their heads, for which we still have to, one of these days, pick up the book on reparations and start our own discussions with them. But could it be that this assistance of the Dutch, could it be making inroads to ultimately capture the grand prize, which in the case of St. Martin would be Mullet Bay? Okay, would be Mullet Bay. Because if we are put in a position where we cannot repay, because it will be difficult. Thank God that about the 10 hurricanes that were formed this year coming off the coast of Africa, all of them came into the Caribbean or into the Caribbean area and then bent north. America was hit by one of them, but we in the Caribbean have been spared, thank God. But there's probably still more to come. So we are not out of the woodworks yet, and not that I'm calling things upon St. Martin, but it could have equally been so, that St. Martin may have been hit by one or more hurricanes like was the case in the past. And then our hands would have been stretched out, looking for assistance again, because as long as we are in this kingdom, the international community is saying, you are part of one of the bigger donors in the world, so how are you looking to me for money? The money has to come from within. But the money isn't coming as assistance to the smaller brothers and sisters. The money is coming with conditions. And interestingly, if we look through the history books, we would see that when Holland had its problems, people here in the Dutch Caribbean collected money and sent it to the bigger brother. It wasn't much to them, but definitely a lot from us, from what we could have afforded. Piggy banks were touched in order to make that donation possible, but it was never under a condition. But now, we are faced with condition after condition after condition. And my concern is that Mullet Bay is the most precious property in the Eastern Caribbean. I'm sure every island will tell you, oh, this bay is better and this bay looks nicer in this and that. But the package Mullet Bay is #1 in the Caribbean. And for those of us who were around back then in the 60s, well, in the 70s, the Miami Herald used to run a full-page ad every Saturday. Why come to St. Martin? Because Mullet Bay is in St. Martin, and why go to Mullet Bay? Because Mullet Bay is in St. Martin. So you go to St. Martin because of Mullet Bay, and when you're in St. Martin, when you're at Mullet Bay, it is because of St. Martin. That was the big headliner, the big impact, and I think it is still so. But as the business people that they are, it would not surprise me that in the end, Mullet Bay may be secretly being discussed because, hey guys, if we push St. Martin in a position where they can't pay, then we're going to say, okay, we forgive you a part of the debt or a chunk of the debt, and Mullet Bay is ours. We'll take Mullet Bay, and we'll develop Mullet Bay, and the Dutch will have a nice little Riviera right here on St. Martin that was lying undeveloped, untouched for the past 28 years now since Hurricane Luis passed through here, and Mullet Bay was declared closed. We heard about the Golden Key that was going to open Mullet Bay. We heard about all kinds of proposals for Mullet Bay. I have been in discussions where plans were laid out for Mullet Bay, but they were never once realized. And now probably we can see the reason why. But I have that concern that that can be one of the things that the Dutch government may be looking at. Because you know what's interesting? And I'm saying this for the first time, I guess, here in Parliament. When I was Prime Minister and I went to a meeting of the organization, I think it was of OECS, I think, in Cuba, the OECS. And the Prime Minister of the Netherlands was present, and so were the Prime Ministers of Curaçao, Aruba, and St. Martin. And the theme of the discussion, or the theme of the Prime Minister of the Netherlands discussion, was how we were one kingdom and with 4 different countries, and how we were one kingdom and we are all here represented, and was happy to point out the different prime ministers that were there. But then, in going to one reception after the main meeting, I learned that the Prime Minister came with a private plane, or a chartered flight rather, with a complete delegation of Dutch business people, because Cuba was opening to the rest of the world. And the Dutch delegation came there, spearheaded by the Prime Minister, on how Holland could do business with the Dutch. And there was not one Prime Minister from the Dutch Caribbean was included in that discussion. We were left out. We are neighbors right here. There are opportunities that could have been there for us to develop, but it was only for the Dutch and how they can do business with Cuba. And you know what would have been interesting? Had the Prime Minister of St. Martin, Curaçao, or Aruba headed a delegation with a couple of his business friends or business associates or people who he know business people. They don't even have to be his friends, but business people from his country. And he take them on a trip like that and say, you know, while we are there, let me introduce you to the Cuban government and see how you can benefit from doing business. Every agency would have come down on that prime minister, remove him from office, investigate him or her for corruption and dealing and favoritism and nepotism and the whole 9 yards. So it would not pass me that this is another business opportunity that they may see and may very well hold up the flag to bail us out, but in their back, they're holding the little sword that will cut down Mullet Bay from under us, and then we see our little Riviera drift off to Europe right under our eyes. Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and that's it for now.
Thank you, MP William Marlin. We have a couple more speakers, but I'll adjourn once again for 3 more minutes, and then we will continue.
Good afternoon and welcome, welcome back to the Central Committee meeting with our Minister of Finance, and the discussion surrounds the situation with ENNIA. We now continue with the speakers, and on my speakers list, I see here on the screen, MP Christophe Emmanuel. No, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
MP Christophe, there's something,
Yeah,
it's good?
yeah.
MP Christophe Emmanuel, and then I think it's MP George Pantaflet next.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And you sort of, well, the previous speaker sort of caught me off guard because the chair has changed. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I wanted to make mention that in a very, very, very long time, I haven't agreed with much that was said by your person, but today I'm going to admit that I'm 100% agreeing with what you have said, Mr. Chairman. And because of that, it prompted me to edge in a little bit more concerning this issue and to really focus on the part of the Dutch government and also with a proposal. But Mr. Chairman, my colleague made mention that they don't call names or she don't call names. Well, I do, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, a question came in to me to ask. And I would like to ask through you to the Honorable Minister, because he'll have to go and do his research and get the figures, because the people of Curacao and St. Martin want to know. And surprisingly, this came from Curacao. Mr. Chairman, they want to know through you how much money did AT&T Ace made? How much? They want to know, Mr. Chairman, how much money did Mr. Saleh made? Saleh. Whichever way his name is pronounced, how much money? They also want to know, Mr. Chairman, how much money did Clarence Derby here in St. Martin made and never worked for the company? Mr. Chairman, my colleague made mention of the two foundations. Where did that money come from? They want to know, Mr. Chairman. They also want to know right here in St. Martin, how much money did Richard Gibson made? Mr. Chairman, they want to know. And they also want to know who all was on the board that made money and how much. They want a figure. They want a whole figure. They want it all. How much? Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, it is good now that the prosecutor's office has finally woken up, because a couple of weeks ago they had no capacity to go after Ansari. None whatsoever. But like you made mention, Mr. Chairman, if Abramovich plane land here, they're going to rush to seize it. They got capacity then. To go into people's homes and houses, they have capacity for that. But they have probably changed their tone now, and they are launching an investigation, which is a good thing, Mr. Chairman. But Mr. Chairman, I want to show, as you made mention, what could be the sinister and ulterior motive, which is the stealing of Mother Bay. Mr. Chairman, they say when elephant fights, the grass suffer. The people of St. Martin will be suffering because of individuals that stole from a company that they had nothing to do with it. Mr. Chairman, the Dutch government knew since 2014 by the Dutch Central Bank that there were irregularities. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to read the discussion from the Tweede Kamer from in 2018, where Van den Berg and Reines from CDA asked questions to the then Minister of Overseas and the Minister of Finance Hoekstra. Mr. Chairman, question 1. Are you familiar with the article Central Bank of Curacao places ENNIA under guardianship? The answer is yes. Question 2. Were the Netherlands Bank, DNB, already aware of any signals about the situation at ENNIA before October 10, 2010? If so, what steps did DNB take at the time? How did DNB issue warnings 2 years ago, as we revealed at the time by the Financial Aid Dagblad, were issued persons informed at that time? If so, in what way? The answer? As my predecessor indicated, answering questions from members De Vries and Bosman, both VVD, a member Van Raak, SP, about news reports about ENNIA in 2016. DNB's responsibility for the supervision of this insurer is limited. 3, ENNIA has its seat in Curacao. At the time of the Netherlands Antilles, until October the 10th, 2020, the Bank Nederlandse Antilles, BNA, was responsible for the supervision of financial institutions on all islands in the Caribbean part of the kingdom, including ENNIA, from 2016. With the exception of Aruba, the BNA was the legal predecessor of the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, the CBCS. At the time, DNB had no formal supervisory role in the Netherlands Antilles and was therefore not involved in the financial supervision of ENNIA. Since the constitutional reforms of October 10, 2010, the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin has been responsible for the potential supervision of ENNIA. DNB's supervision is now limited to integrity. You hear the word? Integrity. The Dutch Central Bank. DNB has a duty of confidentiality under Article 120 of the Best Financial Market Act, WFM BEST. The aim of the obligation of confidentiality is to limit any harmful consequences from the institution involved and the policy of account holders. Let me read this again. DNB has a duty of confidentiality under Article 120 of the Best Financial Markets Act, WFM BEST. The aim of the obligation of confidentiality is to limit any harmful consequences for the institution involved and the policy or account holders. Mr. Chairman, the Dutch government knew this from 2014. They spoke about this in 2018. This is the answer from their finance minister, Hoekstra. Mr. Chairman, we are now in 2023. They did nothing, absolutely nothing, for the account holders here that they're talking about. Mr. Chairman, it goes on to say, due to the amount of other things, this obligation of confidentiality, and because of my system responsibility as minister, whereby in principle I do not receive information about individual supervised institutions from DNB. It is not possible to answer questions about the content of warnings and any steps taken. However, it is known about DNB's action and indicated by my predecessor that DNB, based on its limited supervisory task and responsibility towards the best policyholders, submitted requests for information to the Central Bank of Peterson and St. Martin in response to signals about problems at ENNIA. Mr. Chairman, and the people of St. Martin, the Honorable Minister, my colleagues, listen to this part good. Listen to this part good. It says, submitted request for information to the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin in response to signals about problems at ENNIA in the autumn of 2013. 2013. 2013. So somebody do a calculation for me, Mr. Chairman. 2013 to 2023 is how much? How long is that? How long is that, Mr. Chairman? The Dutch government knew. The Dutch government knew about it and did absolute. Why you didn't pay it off from then? When it was probably smaller then. Why you didn't take action from then? But now you want to thrust it down the throats of Curacao and St. Martin. It goes on to say, DNB subsequently entered into consultation with the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin about a supervisory approach, which ultimately resulted in an investigation into ENNIA. In June of 2015, DNB sent its findings to ENNIA in a confidential report. They should do well with this government, seeing that they like confidential stuff. It says, the Antilliaanse Dagblad also reported in June of 2017 about a lawsuit that DNB had filed. A lawsuit that DNB had filed against ENNIA. It goes on to say, according to the Antilliaanse Dagblad, the lawsuit took place behind closed doors, and DNB lost. The article states that the court determined that the other components imposed by DNB under penalty undeniably have a profound impact on the business operations of ENNIA in Curacao, not St. Martin, in Curacao. With the decisions contested by ENNIA, DNB has therefore entered the area in which the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, in principle, has exclusive jurisdiction. The judge considered according to the Antilliaanse Dagblad, Mr. Chairman. These are questions. This is the answer, Mr. Chairman, from the Minister of Finance back in 2018. I know my colleague Rolando Bryson will elaborate a bit more on it. He showed me how to put it in Google Translate. Mr. Chairman, as much as you are concerned, I deeply share your concern too as well. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say this through you to the Honorable Minister, that there's a proposal I want to speak about. I have to thank our suspended Member of Parliament, Claudius Boncampo, for putting pen to paper. Mr. Chairman, the problem is of such a nature that the loan will destroy country St. Martin unnecessarily, and thus the motion not to take the loan. To ensure we don't just talk a sweet talk, we present a plausible option to ensure that the government can get back Mullet Bay once and for all for the locals of this country while safeguarding the pensions and livelihood of its pensioners caught up in this horrible crime committed to ENNIA by an organized group of criminals. One, the government of St. Martin will have a calculation made what the pension cost of all St. Martin-based policyholders are presently at the moment ENNIA group, and have this debt taken over by the government of St. Martin. All ENNIA pension and policy holders will be resorted under the APS pension fund here in St. Martin, moving forward with the benefits as the fund applies. St. Martin government will make a payment agreement with the APS for the policy holders to ensure no policies are cut or value is lost. The ENNIA group will release the Model Bay property free of debt to the government of St. Martin, and the difference between policy values and property value will be regulated in a separate binding agreement between the parties. The country of St. Martin will place the Mullet Bay property as collateral at the disposal of Mullet Bay for an eventual exploitation in collaboration and agreement of the country, or if the country is in default after the agreed upon term for outright sale to recoup its funds. Once the pension premiums have been paid in full to APS fund, the Mullet Bay property will resort back to the country of St. Martin. That's a proposal, Mr. Chairman, that I hope the government of St. Martin can take under advisory, can look at it, and see where they can go with it. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Christophe Emmanuel. And we move on immediately to the next speaker, MP George Pontiflet.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, my colleagues in Parliament, our Khifir, our Honourable Minister of Finance, and his support staff, persons that are viewing by the available medium. Mr. Chairman, as you would say in colloquial language, this is a hot potato. This is a hot potato. Mr. Chairman, a lot was said by former colleagues, and some of the statements that were made and the questions that were asked are some that I wanted to ask also. I might even repeat them. Because, Mr. Chairman, I also want my pound of flesh. You see, one of the things I don't want us to get sidetracked by is to put all issues locally and not focus on what some of my colleagues said. Because when my colleague was talking about the issue of the Dutch and what they are planning and so on, I already had noted down here, was this issue of ENNIA a setup? Was it a setup? Because it is hard for me to accept the fact, Mr. Chairman, that they did not know what is taking place. Mr. Chairman, we who have studied under the Dutch system know very well that they're very meticulous and they take their time to plant things. They plant the seed, you know. They say Americans just put that root there and the tree grows, but the Dutchman digs the ground, puts the seed, waters it every day, and then he watches it grow. So he takes his time. Mr. Chairman, this is why I said, was this not a setup? Because it is difficult for me to accept the fact, as I was saying, that they did not know anything that was taking place. But now my colleague was very detailed in explaining that they knew exactly what they were doing. So, Mr. Chairman, the hypocrisy is glaring indeed. Mr. Chairman, why do I mention this? I don't know if any of you can remember the former Rabobank, with the beautiful interest rates and so on. It looked very nice. But how many persons lost their homes? How many persons lost their homes? And when the court case was held in Curacao, who do you think won the case? Rabobank. Persons lost their home because why? They think we should have known what the future would entail. I was one of those, Mr. Chairman, who also fell for that. But thank God, I was able to survive, and I still own, well, partially, because the bank owns part of it, the home. Mr. Chairman, again, I repeat myself, is the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin responsible for supervising car rentals, insurance companies, and so on, to make sure they run in a proper manner? Are they responsible? according to the articles, because how is it that under their watch this transpired? That's why I have a question. It is said that 1.2 billion gallons was taken out of ENNIA by Mr. Ansari, the leader, the owner. My question through you, Mr. Chairman, was this amount taken out all at once, or was it done in stages? How was it done? Because I'm trying to understand how 1.2 billion gallons can disappear with so many eyes at the same time, Mr. Chairman. There must have been a conspiracy. It is impossible that this took place. Mr. Chairman, we are told that if the matter is not solved by the ending of January, that the seniors on St. Martin, the 3,000 St. Martin, 27,000 in Curacao, would only receive 20% of their pension. At present, though, I believe it looks as if it's okay for end of September, October, November, December. I saw in an editorial where it was mentioned, I don't know if the amount is correct, that 3.5 million gallons is paid monthly to the seniors. My question is, Mr. Chairman, through you, to the Minister, how much is St. Martin's share of the 3.5 million gallons? How much is St. Martin's share of the 3.5 million gallons? So, Chairman, a question I have, because you see, the CFT was quite clear when they stated that given this additional loan, or forcing it, because it's not a gift, it's a loan that they're forcing, not approved as yet, though, would not bode well on St. Martin's finances. And that was so interesting because, the Chairman, you know, that's why you see, I have an issue when it comes to CFT and, you know, the economy is doing well and so on. And let me say this, though, Mr. Chairman. I congratulate the Minister of Finance and the staff on the job that they're doing within the system, within the situation that we're facing. CFT St. Martin says, St. Martin doing well financially so far this year. So far this year. But they still had problems with the Dutch saying that we have to borrow money from them. And my question, Mr. Chairman, through you to the Minister is, did we request the loan or did they offer? Because the writ came across from Alexander Van Huffelen, the State Secretary. It was as if we asked, and they said yes, but these are the conditions. And I will continue to repeat myself, Mr. Chairman, because you see sometimes people miss it the first time. You got to say it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. 2.5 billion euros has been put aside for the war in Ukraine to assist the Ukrainians with no conditions, Mr. Chairman. With no conditions. This is not fancy or Nancy story, this is a fact. Why is it that you are, and my colleague call him brother, I don't call him any brother, tell you that for sure. Maybe I'm their father, that's better. Yeah, because, you know, they came from us. All human beings came from the black man, that's a fact. Go back to Africa. So, Mr. Chairman, how is it now that you are telling us, who are part of the kingdom, that you're going to force more loans upon us, even though the IMF said that it should give us gifts or donations, or turn those former loans, even prior to the credit support, they should turn it into gifts or donations, Mr. Chairman. That's what the IMF said. But, again, what is the hidden agenda? What is the hidden agenda? Again, is it not a setup? Mr. Chairman, 600 million euros. And you know what is interesting? If you're paying attention, which I believe we are doing, and I hope the public is listening and they're viewing. You see, don't think, oh, this is government, this is parliament. No, it has to do with you. It has to do with you. Now, the amount was mentioned by one of my colleagues, 146 million gallons. I think it's in Martin's share, that can be corrected. But what I want to explain to listeners, Mr. Chairman, is the 3 installments, because that's what I see it as. 'Cause I think they said one payment has been made in 15 years or whatever, then 22 years, and then 30 years. So I need to be explained, Mr. Chairman, what does that mean? When does it start? Does it start with the 2024 budget? What amount will be placed in the 2024 budget that has to do with the ENNIA loan? I don't know. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, because fact of the matter is the people have a right to know. Mr. Chairman, question were asked. I really, really would like to know what the answers are going to be, because I understand that there's a deadline. Now, you forcing a loan on us, and then you tell us there's a deadline, Mr. Chairman. And that is why my question that I asked, did we ask for the loan? Or did the Dutch government, on the guise of making, let me see what the Prime Minister of Aruba said here. It's not a paper, but she said, the Dutch tend to make a nice little profit from this venture. You see, one of the things we have to keep in mind, they do nothing for nothing. They do nothing for nothing. Everything is business. Everything is business. And Mr. Chairman, I will close with something that is might be a bit off for this topic. But I can recall I was in the Netherlands some 5, 6 years ago. And I think they were talking about international waters, I think. And there was an expert who was giving a presentation. And I think he mentioned something about oil down in our area, close to Saberbank and so on. And as they say, you know, as the old saying goes, if ice could have killed, those parliamentarians would have killed that gentleman, because why? He's a professional, he's not a politician. And they felt that he should not have divulged that information there. Again, it all has to do with business. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to bore the listeners anymore, the viewers anymore. I'm going to wait the answers to questions that were posed by some of my colleagues and decide whether I will pursue the matter further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George Pantaflet. The next speaker, MP Rayon Peterson. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A good afternoon to yourself, to the griffier, to the Secretariat, to the Honorable Minister and the support staff, and to my colleagues, to everybody else tuned in, and to those in the tribune. Mr. Chairman, I have to partially agree with some of the MPs that spoke before me, but I also have a point of concern, because I see that a lot of the blame is being put on Holland, Netherlands for knowing, you know, that things were going wrong, but we are also an autonomous country. We have chosen to deal with these regulations ourselves, and this is concerning Molly Bay, a local property in St. Martin. It is not Holland's responsibility to step in until, well, now that we are in a ditch and we need help. So, you know, although I understand the sentiment, it is not Holland's fault. Because as we saw that same list of people that Emmanuel mentioned, a lot of locals are on that list. Not only locals from St. Martin, but also locals from Curaçao. That is where the problem began. Those are the people who facilitated the environment in which Ansari could have done what he did. You know, so that's also something that does not need to be forgotten, because we are, you know, like we say and like we like to boast, a young autonomous country. So this is part of our responsibility, that we decided within the first couple of years of being a young country that we will mismanage the situation to the fullest and fill our pockets. That's something different. And I think that needs to be addressed, because we are looking at Ansari and at Holland, but I'm not hearing anything about those same individuals that MP Emmanuel mentioned, those who we can hold accountable, some of those who were in public office. You know, so I think we need to how to say, richt the vinger at who is actually causing all of this. But to come back to the issue at hand, I want to know through you, Mr. Chairman, from the minister, if these persons cannot be criminally prosecuted. Why is that not being talked about? Everybody that benefited from this saga, because we got a verdict in 2021 in which, ENNIA got a very hard tick of the fingers from the judge. And like we all know, a list of names was given with the amounts of monies that they were given. I don't understand why, first of all, we have not chosen to criminally prosecute these persons, but also why have we not chosen to go down the civil court? Why haven't we chosen to, for example, do a class action for all of the policy and account holders, where everybody gets to sue those persons who personally benefited from this? We have the Book 6, Article 162, onrechtmatige daad. Why is that not an avenue if getting the money back for the people is the priority? So that would be one of my questions to you, Mr. Chairman, to the minister. Also, it's wishful thinking, to think that some of these individuals actually have a shame box, MP Gumbs, to begin with. But if that were the case, then we most likely would not be so far down this ditch that we are now. So again, we are looking at the money and we are looking at the land and the concerns for the policyholders, but the solutions that I'm hearing are more in the light of let's blame Holland, let's find a scapegoat, let's find somebody else to blame except ourselves while this problem just continues. We have invited the minister to come here on the 28th of September while the answer to Holland has to be in by the 30th. So, and then I would like to come back to the land itself, because we do also have a national ordinance for expropriation. And I think that this is at algemene nut. What's happening right here, given how many persons are involved, given that we are talking about a local asset, our nicest beach, Mullet Bay, have the options been put in the onteigeningslandsverordening? Have they been explored? And Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, through you, to the minister, is there also a solution with the refinancing that could ultimately end with St. Martin owning Mullet Bay? A sort of a swap or exchange scenario, but then to also solidify taking and holding the land back for the people. So when I say take it back, I don't mean take it back to then sell it to any foreign investors, regardless if they live here locally and regardless of how many buildings or hotels they have. And that'll be all for me for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Peterson. And the next speaker, MP Heilige-Marten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd like to ask the Minister of Finance to just, for the public, for the people to understand, let's say we go the route of, as stated before, that Parliament is supposed to approve this in the 2024 budget, and let's say that Parliament does not approve of this. Obviously, I think the proposal was that if we do not approve, that we get the an increase in interest rates. But then, okay, so we don't approve it, we don't pay it back, then who pays that back? What happens then with the 3,000 people? And how would Holland react when this parliament, this exact parliament that unanimously passed a motion for debt cancellation, which is another question I'm posing to you, through you, Mr. Chairman, has that been a topic of discussion? I know I've heard it once. I've heard that the State Secretary blatantly disregarded it. I think maybe I would like to know if that discussion came back up again, or maybe give us an elucidation of what exactly is Holland's position on St. Martin's stance, the Parliament, on debt cancellation. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, has this government been able to seek advice outside of the kingdom, internationally, get legal advice outside of the kingdom, vet this outside of this entire situation, outside of the kingdom, internationally? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Grisha Heilige-Marten. And the next speaker, MP Rolando Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon once again to my colleagues, to the minister, and to those viewing. Mr. Chairman, everything I've heard and everything I continue to hear regarding this topic is somewhat bittersweet. I say the only sweet part of this is that this is the most I've heard Parliament actually speaking about the reality of things that I was told to leave that alone, don't call Ansari name. It has now emboldened the Parliament of St. Martin to finally step up and realize who is at the crux and the center of this situation. And I think that is great. It also is bitter in the sense that I don't have all the details from the minister. I don't have exactly what the terms and so on are. But I can imagine where there is a reluctance, for example, from you, Mr. Chairman, and others, to shoulder the burden of this private company that, yes, has pensioners that are at risk. Those people are at risk because of the person that chose to basically attempt to bankrupt this company and fleece it, Mr. Chairman. Now, of course, at the end of this and looking at some of this, I would present maybe some alternatives that I think the minister should at least consider, or not maybe alternatives, but some changes to the way we might go about this. But Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to understand that, in my opinion, there's 3 phases of responsibility in terms of the oversight. Because, indeed, whether it was Hotland or Central Bank or so on, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important for people to understand one central thing. Mullet Bay was transferred to ENNIA in 2004. The court verdict makes very clear that immediately upon the transfer of the property, from 2003, it was valued $56 million. And suddenly in 2005, it went up to $68 million. To 2005, $242 million. 2006, $250 million. 2007, $426 million, etc., between the years of 2005 to 2010. Mr. Chairman, that was not under the auspices of the Central Bank in Curaçao and St. Martin. That was the Bank van de Nederlandse Antillen. So, what I'm highlighting here, who sits on as the responsible person on that board? It was according to Article, this is from the old legislation that I managed to pull up from the original legislation of the Central Bank. It was the commissioner appointed by the local government of Curaçao that had full authority on behalf of the minister and reported to the governor of the Netherlands Antilles. St. Martin did not have the shares that we have now. St. Martin did not have a representative. Maybe you were able to negotiate on a Netherlands Antilles level a board member and so on, but this was primarily an oversight of the Netherlands Antilles in the beginning, because the fact is, the overvaluation started in 2004. If when I came into Parliament in 2018, just by looking at Sun Resorts financials and ENNIA's financials and realizing right away that, wait a minute, Mullet Bay valued at $420 million? And then they're borrowing against that? I'm not a financial expert, and at least a light bulb came in my mind to say something is wrong. So between 2004 and 2010, no one in the Netherlands Antilles saw that there was a problem? If the Netherlands Antilles had found out back then that this was an issue, would this have been an issue today if emergency regulations were done back then? So when we look at the whole culpability, pointing fingers, that's not what I want to do. I want to show via this timeline, because MP Emmanuel went to 2013 in terms of the Dutch and so on. This dates back to 2004, when we were an island territory and had little or no say with regards to the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles. And on that level, in an office predominantly centered in Curaçao, yeah, we had a little branch here, but this was a Curaçao entity, let's be real. Those financial statements went there. The commissioner of finance saw these things. The board, the president, the governor of the Netherlands, and everybody was seeing this. And no one did nothing, Mr. Chairman. Predominantly now, most of, and that's why I know that people in Curaçao are watching. And I need them to also realize that most of the people who are at risk, the Netherlands Antilles had an opportunity to fix it, and no one did nothing. St. Martin then inherits so-called 27% of the central bank. Now today, St. Martin is on the hook for something that should have been addressed long before that, as a matter of fact. Mr. Chairman, there's no bank, no insurance company in the world that would get away with such overvaluations for 7 years. But it happened in the Netherlands Antilles. And the buck has been passed to both of these countries to have to deal with it. So if we really want to really highlight accountability, go back to 2004, go back to those commissioners, those governors, all of that. Because can you imagine, Mr. Chairman, you were a very instrumental part of the handover from 2009 to 2010. With all that we were setting up, police and federal and immigration and all of that, did we really have any attention and focus on what was going on with one individual insurance company that's supervised by this new central bank of Curaçao and St. Martin? Were we really equipped to see that back then? The Netherlands Antilles had hundreds of employees, hundreds of lawyers, millions of dollars available to them, and they let it slide. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned earlier the scheme that Mr. Ansari did, which is very simple terms. You overvalue something in order to draw loans against it. What's very interesting, Mr. Chairman, is that just yesterday, or I believe it was today, because I think I know where Mr. Ansari learned this. Because on September 26, 2023, judge finds Donald Trump liable for fraudulently overvaluing real estate empire. A civil case brought by New York attorney Letitia James against real estate tycoon and former President Donald Trump can go ahead, the judge ruled. The case alleges that Trump inflated the value of his properties by as much as $2 billion, and against these secured loans and insurance deals through misvaluing the properties. Birds of a feather flock together, Mr. Chairman. Exactly that scheme is what happened at ENNIA. It was never about safeguarding ENNIA or making it a stronger company. It was that I finally got out of this legal battle with these timeshare owners, and right after that, let me throw this in this company so I can try to recoup the money that I rightfully was forced to give to those people that were duped as timeshare owners and property owners. This is what it seems to have boiled down to, based on all of the information we have here. So now that we understand the problem, now that we understand where this started, Mr. Chairman, I think now St. Martin is, to ENNIA, in a very difficult position. What I do like that the minister highlighted, and I think it's a matter of probably a bit of a change in the relationship with the Netherlands. Because if this was probably 2010, if this was KNAPS, it would not be pending the approval of Parliament. It was even the Parliament need to pass this, and then we go and talk. What I understand is happening right now is that there's a governmental level sort of proposal that is being put together. It is being signed provisional on all of the different parliaments getting involved in this, so including the second chamber. We don't even know, maybe the second chamber themselves might be, what are we doing bailing out these people in St. Martin? That's very possible. Curaçao Parliament might say the same. St. Martin Parliament might say the same. I say this to highlight that this brings me memories of the Coho, Mr. Chairman, where I would say through you to the minister, government, you do what you have to do, and the Parliament will do what we have to do. Because we are the body that ultimately needs to approve what loans go and how it is done and the schedule and all of this. But in the meantime, Mr. Chairman, to save and to really ask some consideration for a much better solution in my eyes, maybe it's flawed, but when I look at what the court case revealed to be the sort of deficit situation with ENNIA, we are talking about 600 million being pumped in what seems to be like cash injection into an entity that has a solvency issue, so a book solvency issue. Mr. Chairman, the Netherlands is no stranger to giving bank guarantees to different entities around the world. As a matter of fact, according to the latest budget that they're currently handling, the Dutch government currently has 352 billion euros in guarantees handed out that are at no interest. In other words, what they do, is, for example, they have a, let me just read one of them. Here you have a geothermal heat guarantee project. I don't know which country this is, but what this sounds like, hey, there's an opportunity to start extracting geothermal energy. What we're going to do is give you a bank guarantee for 557 million euros. You can then use that because we think this is going to be a good investment. We think you'll get the money back. Zero involvement of actually having to move cash. It is a promissory note that is given by the Dutch government to this entity to put on their books as a potential asset. Now, if we aren't confident that some way, somehow, Ansari is going to pay, that means that should be a good debt. I think Mr. Chairman mentioned, you think he's good for it. So whatever legal hurdles have to be passed, that money is going to be retrieved. So why are we putting cash, taking a loan, money, by the government, putting money into ENNIA when the central bank, as per Article 30 of the emergency measure that they have put on ENNIA, is directly responsible over ENNIA. In other words, they can negotiate directly with the DNB and say, I am the legal entity, not St. Martin. We are a shareholder of that entity. But as per Article 30 of the Administrative Action, they have full legal entity over this. When you go to the Chamber of Commerce and you ask for an extract of ENNIA Holding, you know what you see as the managing director? The Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin. That's the level of the role of the central bank for the people to understand. So the central bank is the legal entity that can have this negotiation. Ask for a bank guarantee. Holland, you're so serious about helping. Do what you've done for over 352 billion euros to other countries all around the world that doesn't cost you a single cent. Issue a guarantee from the DNB to the central bank so that the central bank, while having that emergency authority, can ensure that the books of ENNIA are strong. If there's need for cash flow as a proper private entity, go on the commercial market and say, I need about 20 million this year in order to pay some pensions, because that's the other thing. Let's not confuse the public and feel like next year all pensions are being paid out. These are long-term liabilities that as a book situation, yes, you do need to fill. But from a cash flow perspective, they don't need 600 million to be spent January 1st. This is a gradual situation. So give them a bank guarantee so that if they need to now go on the commercial market to get a 20 million to cover 2023, they have a bank guarantee from the Netherlands. Any bank will give them the cash. And from their existing business, they can replenish that and go and collect from Ansari, who you have a 1.2 billion Gilda judgment against. Zero involvement of the taxpayer of St. Martin. Zero involvement of the Parliament of St. Martin. Handle it how the law allows them to handle. That's why the emergency regulation is added to the central bank law for these type of situations. I don't know if this has been explored. It could very well be, because that will be the answer to the question whether this is some sort of conspiracy. Because what I outlined right here, if the minister, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would like to ask the minister to please explore this with the Netherlands. And if the Netherlands says no, I rather give you a loan than give ENNIA via the central bank a bank guarantee, then the alarm's got to be raised. Why would you rather give cash than a piece of paper with the stamp of the royal decree to guarantee the loan and let ENNIA continue? That would be extremely strange to me unless I'm missing something. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that angle of a guarantee, there is the legal basis within the budget of the Netherlands that, like I mentioned, there's over 352. We're just asked to be 0.6 of that, which is what, 0.02% of the entire thing? And I'm not saying, let me rephrase that. We're not asking. I am suggesting this. Because what I'm asking to do is to not put this burden on the people of St. Martin by raising our interest norm. Yeah, we're going to be below the minimum. But what happens if next year we want to build schools and we want to do this and we want to do that? You know what CFT going to tell us? Well, you apply, we the Parliament of St. Martin, going to pass a budget for 100 million in capital expenditures. And CFT going to turn around and say, well, your Parliament approve it, but sorry, your interest norm is not big enough. So scratch off that school, scratch off that road, scratch off this this tourism project, scratch off all of this because you're now too close to your interest norms, because now you're tied to what you've done with ENNIA. One last question, Mr. Chairman. I see a lot of the emphasis on the interest norm. My concern is, what does this loan do to our debt to GDP ratio? Have consideration made for that? But nonetheless, Mr. Chairman, I like to be as solution-oriented a person as possible. I would really hope some sort of consideration is given to going the deposit guarantee route rather than a loan. And if it is the Netherlands that is saying, no, we don't want to give a guarantee, we want to give you a loan, we want to put you into debt, then let the Minister of Finance please inform the Parliament accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bryson. And we have another speaker that just signed in, MP Peterson once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two questions that I missed in my my speech to the minister. Minister, first of all, the CFT did give their answer on this topic, I think, in a letter not too long ago, I think 2 months ago. En in de conclusion of said letter, it says that het CFT constateert echter ook dat de voorgestelde oplossing deze risico's niet a priori wegneemt, terwijl juist wel beperkingen in investeringsmogelijkheden zullen optreden. So that fits right into what MP Bryson just said, because if we are going to push ourselves in a corner with this loan from Holland, then that means that we can forget about the international market. That's off the bat. But also, then, the CFT continues, het CFT begrijpt dat er meerdere oplossingsrichtingen zijn overwogen die een minder zware wissel zouden trekken op de overheidsfinanciën. So that basically means that within those discussions, those ambtelijke discussions that they had, other options were explored according to the CFT. En de CFT says, het geeft u nadrukkelijk in overweging deze en andere oplossingsrichtingen voor de problemen bij ENNIA te heroverwegen, vooral met het oogmerk om toe te werken naar de duurzame overheidsfinanciën. So I would like to ask in that note, what other oplossingsrichtingen is the CFT talking about? Because that would have been part of the discussion. And why haven't those been explored when the CFT is alluding that those would be much of a less burden on the islands than what is currently being proposed? And then, Mr. Chairman, just a side note on the overvaluation of the property. I think the reason for that needs to also be, explained to the people of St. Maarten, because what happened is throughout those years, whether it's 2004 or 5 or 6, Ansari decided after the original evaluation of Mullet Bay, which was around $57 million, after that he decided to use a meetbrief from, I think it was 1972 or 73, in which million, yeah. So so this meetbrief basically runs back all the way down to the shore, and I think that was the issue, and that's why he got through with overvaluating the property. Because why? If you look at just the golf course, I can see why the golf course could cost 60, maybe even to 100 million. But with the Mullet Bay Beach, our most precious beach, as part of that land, that is how I believe that over-evaluation came into play. And now, given the recent developments, given that in 2019, the government did what we call eigendomshandelingen, thus making it sure that legally the beach itself, according to Article 25 and 26 of Book 5 of the Civil Code, is not part of any private land or private ownership, but indeed the beach belongs to the people. I want to ask the minister in that sense, has there been a reappraisal done of the property that excludes the beach part? And if so, what is that amount and how does that tie up into what Ansari has put up as the value of the land? And I think that if we do that, we will definitely find more answers. And I personally believe that if the amounts are so different, and I will assume that amounts would be at least 200 million and up a difference, then I think that Ansari should also be held personally liable for that. And that'll be all from me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Rian Peterson. We now move on to MP Ludmila de Weever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to keep it very brief because we have gone through a lot of questions here today, Minister. And while my questions were of a technical nature, in the sense of, capital shareholders, payments coming, who gets it applied, how is it applied? I'm just going to keep it very simple. MP Gumbs earlier on mentioned an article in the Antilliaanse Dagblad that was talking or referring to an agreement overview. So I was wondering if you have that agreement overview, and if you do, if that could be shared with us, please. Most of the colleagues have been talking about conspiracies, and you do hear the blame game happening and that sort of thing. And when I hear the word conspiracy, you think of a long-standing relationship that has existed among multiple players, and the word that we use for that is collusion. It is collusion amongst government officials. It is collusion amongst members of management in a company. It is collusion amongst management in a regulator. So it's a lot of things happening at the same time, and it's all coming to play, years and years later. But it goes back to why controls should be in place for checking things, why there is checks and balances and everything. And while it might seem unpopular at the time, it happens exactly so that we can avoid situations just like this. That is it for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and I look forward to getting the answers, or all of the answers, from the Minister.
Thank you, MP De Weever. And our next speaker, once again, MP Melissa Gumbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to, as a side note, since MP Emmanuel mentioned him earlier, the former Minister of Finance, post-Irma of this country, was at one point in time board member of the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles for 8 years. So I can't accept that it's portrayed as though we didn't have a representative on the central bank back then. He was there. MP Emmanuel already said it. Mr. Gibson was there as board member of the Central Bank of the Netherlands Antilles, and then I think Minister of Constitutional and Internal Affairs as well for the Netherlands Antilles at one point in time. I was but a child. So that's just something that I wanted to say, that I think taking responsibility is a part of autonomy. Taking responsibility is a part of independence. So to continue to act as though there were people who were involved in this that were blind, that St. Martin was blind to what was happening, I think once again, to go back to my earlier statement, let them find their shame box and turn it on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. We have come to the end of questions and remarks and observations by members of Parliament, and I want to thank you for that. And I will adjourn for 2 minutes for a brief consultation with the Minister of Finance. Meeting adjourned for 2 minutes. Good afternoon and welcome back again. We have consulted with the Minister of Finance, and there were quite some questions that were raised. The Minister would need some time to research all of it, but has promised to do his utmost best to be back in the next meeting week when we will continue with the discussions, hopefully solutions, and all the answers. So this meeting is adjourned until the next meeting week. Meeting adjourned.